Welcome to another Patreon video. Today I wanted to talk about the quarterstaff. The quarterstaff is a weapon which was already known in England and elsewhere in Europe during the medieval times. We know it as a school weapon for fencing schools and an entry-level weapon for the use of weapons like the halberd, for the spear and things like that. Of course, it was also a weapon on its own right. And sometimes we saw examples where you might have a metal cap or even a small pointy metal cap on both ends of the quarterstaff. And we already see this with George Silver in the 16th century and also in the early 17th century. Joseph Swetnam shows a lot of quarterstaff in his manual, and both held the weapon highly in regard as a true English weapon, which would give you the upper hand if you fight against any other weapon, except of course I think halberds, billhooks and other staff weapons. But against swords and rapiers and whatnot, I think you might have the upper hand with this weapon, and also it's pointed out that it's a good weapon for fighting against multiple opponents. So in the 18th century the weapon was still in use, and we see this very much associated with the prize fighters and stage gladiators. And so we at least have Donald McBane and also Zachary Wylde, who are mentioning in the first half of the 18th century the use of the quarterstaff. McBane is a little bit brief about it, but Zachary Wylde has a very detailed chapter on the quarterstaff in his little manual. He points out, and this is quite true, that the base for using the quarterstaff is the use of the broadsword or backsword and the use of the small sword. So what he is pointing out is that you use all the guards and cuts or blows and hits and chops of the broadsword, and when it comes to thrusting with the quarterstaff, you use all the engagement, disengagement and thrust with the small sword. And when we look at the lessons he offers, we see that it is quite true. You can see this also in depictions of the stage gladiators. So the stage gladiators in the prize fights, they fought of course with the backsword, they fought with buckler, with parry dagger, and later we also had this pugilism with the unarmed combat. However, the quarterstaff was a weapon they were also using, and we see this, for example, in one, like a business card of James Fick, the famous James Fick, the father of modern boxing, as he is also called, and he was a prize fighter, and we see this on his card. We see him with a broadsword or backsword. We see some single sticks in the background, and maybe something like a wicker targe or wicker buckler, and you're standing on the stage, the crowd around him, and then we see another guy with a quarterstaff around this length, and maybe this is also showing the quarterstaff as a weapon, but I think also that the kind of stage gladiators had kind of a referee, so someone who oversaw the fight, because sometimes there were rules, sometimes there were kind of restrictions what they can do and what they are allowed to do. So I am pretty sure, similar to modern HEMA tournaments, the guy with a long pole in his hand would be someone who can easily ward off people and bring them, separate them and intervene when something is happening. And of course the stage gladiators themselves used the quarterstaff. We see this, for example, with James Miller, and also, as mentioned before, Donald McBane, who was also a stage gladiator in his later days. He also explains a little bit of the quarterstaff. So quarterstaff, quite a versatile weapon in my opinion, a good weapon to work with. Already a very good interpretation of Zachary Wylde's quarterstaff chapter online on YouTube by the Lochaber School of Defense in Australia. I will put a link in the video description so you can see all the lessons. I use a lot of this interpretation for my own interpretation of using the quarterstaff, but I mix some things into it from other sources and from other experiences and source material. But to speak of Zachary Wylde, he says he has also quarterstaff of around 200 to 250 centimeters, so something about this, something about like that. We know George Silver had a measurement system for a quarterstaff, and the quarterstaff he shows is much longer. Personally, I think the length I have, so a little bit more like 200 centimeters, or a little bit shorter, or a little bit longer, is very good for the system Zachary Wylde shows, because what he shows is that you grip the quarterstaff quite on the end of the staff, so like a sword, and holding it like this. And when you have a very long quarterstaff, I think this could become a little bit unhandy. So what he does not do, in my opinion, is to put a lot of staff here on the end, like others do, and hold it short. He does this when he uses what he calls half staff, but I will talk about this a little bit later. But generally speaking, when he stands in his inside guard, he's using this kind of, would say like a two-handed, like a grip with a two-handed sword. He stands in this kind of inside guard. He has also, similar to his backsword section, he has throwing the guards drill. Here he has his inside guard. Then he has his outside guard where he stands wide, just with a broadsword, like Thomas Page shows it. Okay, so this is quite like from an inside guard you do a cut number 2. Okay, and from here, cut number 2, he's an outside guard. Then he comes back over his head with a medium guard, so quite centered here. And then from here he steps wide with a hanging guard as a parry. Okay? So what is important that you can look under your left arm. So if you are like this, obviously you will be hit in the head. Personally, I think you also can do the hanging guard to this side as well, and come forward again with a cut. Final point I want to tell you about is you can generally use just your broadsword movement, so inside guard, outside guard, cut number 1, cut number 2, cut number 3, and so on and so on. You can also switch your hands to the other side. This is a good thing about the quarterstaff, so you can switch the hand, right hand forward, left hand forward. This can give you some advantages and disadvantages for tactical reasons within a fight, especially when the other one has also a staff weapon or quarterstaff. However, in your basic training, you should start, when you're a right-handed fencer, you should start from your broadsword grip just to your quarterstaff guard, and keep your right hand forward, left hand on the back, and start training like this. And then you use your inside guard, outside guard, hanging guard, and so on and so on. And just the angles you learned about. You can do wide, heavy blows, but you can also do quick snap cuts, because the quarterstaff is quite heavy when it's made from ash or similar wood, and you can, even with small snapping cut and a quick chop, you can do quite a damage to unprotected bones like the hands or even the head. So this is potentially a deadly weapon because it has a lot of force. So you don't need to do only swinging power cuts. Of course, against another quarterstaff or staff weapon, this is quite a good reason for having a swing to bring the weapon of the other guy out of the line. However, keep in mind also to use quick snapping cuts and quick chops like you would do with a broadsword. With a broadsword we have full molines, but we also have direct cuts, so you can do the same with the quarterstaff. Then of course we have the thrusts, and here, as Zachary Wylde says, you can do the same like with a small sword. Standing in guard and you're thrusting, okay, the outside, the inside, or tiers and card, okay. So you can do all these kind of hanging thrust and so on and so on. And the same you do with the quarterstaff. And interestingly, he says, like with the broadsword and the small sword, you should go for blows, for chops, for hits, for cutting, for blows. You should go disengage over the weapon of the opponent. And with a thrust, you should go under, so just like with a small sword. And what I also find interesting is when he thrusts, he likes to go here in this tierce guard, or outside guard as I call it. And also you can go under this side and thrust like here. And you don't have to let the quarterstaff slide in your hand. You can also thrust with both hands on the weapon. However, you get some reach advantage, and you don't have to fear for losing your weapon. Of course, you have to be a little bit careful because now you have this big, this big timber on your hand, and if someone hits it out of the way with a parry, you might have problems to recover it quickly. But normally with sliding the hands here, this is quite easy. So this is good because you have this billiard cue effect of thrusting and letting the shaft glide in your hand, okay, like we see in many spear and step fighting traditions. So, however, here when you disengage and then you thrust here, and then you can let your hand slide forward, and the quarterstaff, because of its weight and it's quite sturdy, this hits like a train. So even if you use rattan staffs, which I would prefer for sparring, rattan staffs, when you use them you have quite an impact, even with a fencing nest. So be careful with that, especially when training with real wooden quarterstaffs. When you parry with a quarterstaff, you always have to be careful. So if you go for an inside guard against a cup with an outside guard, you always have to take care that you get the opponent's weapon quite early, so it doesn't slide down on your hand. But because this breaks danger, you still have fragile hands, and if the other guy also has a quarterstaff, a slipping blow here on the hand still hurts like hell and might even break a finger. So you always have to parry and give a little bit of a push so the weapon is out of the line. And then he's also open for your counter. Okay, so for example, you can parry here outside guard with a little bit of push, not too much, you don't want to end down like here, but with a little bit of a push, so he's on the side, and then you can go with a quick cut into his face, or you parry here, and then you let it slide forward with a thrust to the face. So just be careful when you train it, wear padded gloves, big padded gloves, and learn how to defend with it, because it doesn't have hand protection. It's not a basket-hilted broadsword. You can use all the basic movements, just like according to the MacGregor method, but you have to be careful that you parry correctly, so that the weapon of the opponent doesn't slide down. Because if he's getting a bite and pressing really here, and then he's sliding down on purpose, this might hurt as well. So you have to be prepared to slip back. And this is something interesting because also Wylde talks about slipping and then countering, different kinds of slips. So like your hand or your forearm is a target, like with a broadsword you slip back, bring your weapon up, and then you go down onto your opponent's head, for example. So this is really important to take care of your hands, because they are the most vulnerable thing in this complete quarterstaff fighting, and especially when the other fighter also has a quarterstaff or something similar. So Wylde is my personal main source for this, but I mix it up, as I said. I also use a little bit what I know from different staff and spear fighting techniques, just to broaden my game, just to have some other opportunities. So personally, I know that Wylde has this kind of half staff, so he slides up with his hand and the other one follows. So he doesn't hold it like this, he explicitly says this kind of St. George guard or something like that. He explains it, but he says, I don't like it, because your fingers are always in danger. So what he does is bringing his rear hand a little bit forward to shorten the grip, and then from here he uses these kind of quick strikes or thrusts, and then when there's an opportunity, he doesn't cut here, he also says, okay, you can go here with the staff and thrust in closer distance. So this is specifically like with the broadsword and closing and commanding and he says you should be careful about it because you might get your hands injured quite easily. So what I'm mixing up, however, is what Wylde does not use, as far as I know, is to use the rear end of the shaft to shorten it here and make a quick attack here. So this is something what I also do to distract my opponent and to you know, pull my weapon out of his reach, so he cannot, you know, bind it and manipulate it. So I pull it back here, and I can come up with a cut like so. So I pull it back. Now his hand is unprotected. I come up here, and then I come up here with the next. So I really like to do that with a quarterstaff. Another thing, and I think this is more from Victorian quarterstaff, because in Victorian and Edwardian times, the quarterstaff had kind of a renaissance. People would on padded gloves, like boxing gloves, and padded fencing masks, and also very often use cricket, shin protection and knee protection. And they were using, I think, long rattan, quarterstaffs or bamboo. I don't know what's the right one, maybe they use both, however they used the light, very long staff, and then they were fighting for points, even had sort of jumps in it, and doing quick attacks, and also doing these rear cuts and attacks and things like that. It was kind of a recreational quarterstaff thing, as far as I know, to use it, because medieval literature was novels with medieval topics were quite, people were interested in such things, and also Robin Hood and such things, and so this true English weapon was used, but it was also used for as a military combat sport, so as an early preparation, for example, for bayonet fencing and things like that. So I think it's quite a good tool for that. So speaking of, I think it's a very good weapon also today when you want to go into all this sponton, sergeant's halter, pike and bayonet fencing stuff, and especially a musket with a bayonet, a good replica, is not very inexpensive, so you have to pay a lot of money. Maybe you find these Black Fencer bayonet training weapons quite interesting for bayonet training. We made ourselves a simple bayonet trainer, which is a little bit too light to be the real thing, but however it works, it does the job. So the quarterstaff is a good entry level weapon for that, and it's even more versatile than the bayonet, because when you take bayonet fencing, of course, we have all the parries, thrusts, counter thrusts and whatnot. We have the butting, okay, using the butt to strike in close quarters, and therefore the quarterstaff is a good entry-level weapon to train that. It's of course way too light to represent a musket, but when you start to train for staff weapons, for two-handed weapons, also the MacGregor method, you want to go to the bayonet later and the musket, then it's a good start to start with the quarterstaff and train this. So you have all these kind of thrusts. When you have a bayonet, which is more like a knife or a saber bayonet, you even can use to some points these small slashing, cutting things. But of course, with the musket and the bayonet, the thrusts are much more important than any kind of hitting. Yeah, so keep that in mind. Quarterstaff, good entry level weapon for the musket and the bayonet. As I showed in another video already, so we'll just briefly talk about this. Of course, the quarterstaff is, as George Silver already pointed out, is a good weapon when it comes to the two-handed sword. So here with our so-called claymore, the Scottish two-hander, you can use these kind of quarterstaff movements to get an entry into this kind of fighting with this great sword. But I will put a link down below for you to the video where I explain this in more detail. Finally, when we talk about cudgeling, then of course the quarterstaff techniques, or bayonet techniques, call it whatever you want, but I would say It's more like a quarterstaff. Come also in handy when you come here to closer quarters. Okay, so when you have your walking stick and you fight with it one-handed, and then you come into close quarters, you of course have these kind of butt-end strikes like with a musket and bayonet, or where the quarterstaff material can be used with a walking stick. Thanks again for supporting my work. Don't forget to check out the links below for more details about the quarterstaff according to Zachary Wylde, and see you in the next video.